Welcome to this video from the Consultants Development Institute. I'm Carter McNamara, an instructor with the Institute and the presenter in this video. Let's look at the results that you get from participating in this video. First, you'll broaden your view on consulting. The broader your view, the broader the range of options to you in your consulting, and the broader the range of resources available to you as well. We'll review a definition that is much more useful than the mistaken view that consultants just give advice. You'll also learn the common broad categories of consulting so that you can correctly classify your own type of consulting. That's useful when talking to potential clients or when successfully advertising your services. And we'll review the primary goals and working assumptions for any professional consultant, regardless of the type of consulting that they do. Those goals and assumptions guide how they do their work and how well they do their work. And we'll discuss two very contrasting approaches used by consultants to solve their clients' problems. You might be surprised at one of the approaches, an approach that is very often used but seldom talked about. Experienced consultants have learned that the most important person or group in a consulting project is the client. But it's not always easy to know who the real current client is. We'll share guidelines for you to always know that. And we'll help you to build a better foundation for better relationships with internal and external consultants. Many external consultants are hired by internal consultants, that is, by employees whose job is to help fellow employees solve problems in the organization. The better that these two types of consultants understand each other, the better they can work together. Let's start by looking at some foundational concepts in consulting. These concepts lay the groundwork for your truly understanding the nature of consulting and for your successfully solving problems with your clients. We'll start by suggesting a very useful definition of consulting. But before we do that, you might write down your own definition of consulting now, so that you can compare it to what we suggest later on. So pause this recording by clicking on the pause button on the bottom left corner of the video. It's got two small vertical bars in it. Then, in your learning journal, find the section titled During the Video in the Course. Then write your own definition of consulting in that section. You might even discuss some definitions with others who are watching the video with you. Afterwards, press the same button to resume the video. Now, let's look at a very useful definition of consulting, a definition that can greatly expand your view of consulting and the ways that you work with your clients. Peter Block is one of the most respected people in the fields of consulting and organization development. In his seminal book, Flawless Consulting, he explains that you are consulting anytime you are trying to change or improve a situation, but have no direct control over the implementation. So you are consulting if you are, for example, an advisor, a trainer, a coach, a facilitator, or a mentor, as long as you have no direct control over the person or persons whom you are trying to help. For example, as long as those people do not work for you. And Block adds that if a consultant does have direct control over those people, then he is managing, not consulting. One of the greatest frustrations of consulting is the desire to change the client, but not having a direct influence to change the client. Experienced consultants have learned to work with and even appreciate the indirect nature of effective consulting. So, over to you. Do you agree with this definition? Do you want to change your original definition now? You might pause the video and write your answers in your learning journal and then resume the video. In addition to having a very useful definition of consulting now, it helps to know the conventional types of consultants and which type of consulting that you do. That helps you to better explain your consulting to your clients and to market yourself as a consultant. So let's look at the types of consultants first by their types of services. Technical consultants provide highly specialized service, for example, to install and operate computer systems, conduct market research, or run financial and accounting systems. These types of services are often referred to as technical assistants. Management consultants help organizations to be more productive at planning, organizing, leading, and coordinating resources. Their services might include leadership, management, or supervisory development. They might also offer technical assistance. For example, if they're training about the technical aspects of market research or about how to develop nonprofit programs. Organization development consultants help organizations to improve their overall performance, often by helping their clients to change all or significant portions of their organizations. These consultants also might use approaches in technical and management consulting. Regarding organization development consultants, there are several schools of thought regarding the nature of their services. Some people believe they should focus primarily on soft skills, that is, dealing with beliefs, feelings, and perceptions. Others believe they should focus primarily on hard skills, that is, dealing with organizational structures, strategies, and functions. Still, others believe that they should focus on both soft and hard skills. By the way, the phrase business consultant could also be applied to any of these types of consultants who work with organizations. Now, let's categorize consultants by the focus of their services. Generalists have strong expertise across a broad range of activities in organizations, but often not a strong depth in any certain one. For example, organization development consultants might help clients develop best practices across a wide range of management functions in the organization, such as boards, planning, products, staffing, and finances. Management development consultants might do the same if their expertise spans several types of functions. In contrast, a specialist might train people on the state-of-the-art practices in a certain function, such as marketing or finances. Computer consultants usually work as specialists on computer systems and software. So, what is the overall type of service that you provide? And what is the overall focus of your services? Write down your answers in your journal as well. You can also categorize consultants by the nature of their services. Content consultants have strong knowledge and expertise in a particular function or activity, for example, in boards, strategic planning, business planning, marketing, or finance. In nonprofits, they might know a lot about fundraising or working with volunteers. These consultants might prefer to work as specialists and to provide content in the form of training or giving advice. They also might be very good as generalists if they have expertise in a broad range of areas. Process consultants have strong expertise in working with people, for example, in group facilitation or coaching. They might prefer to work as specialists, for example, such as facilitating a particular model of leadership or using a particular model of coaching. They also might work as generalists, since they are very effective working with different types of people in a variety of situations. One other way to categorize consultants is by their relationship to the client's organization. They might be internal or external consultants. We'll talk much more about those in some upcoming slides in this video. For now, consider internal consultants to work in the same organization as their clients, and external consultants do not. So, are you primarily a content consultant or a process consultant? Are you primarily an internal consultant or an external consultant? Pause the video and write down your answers. Different types of consultants, whether generalist or specialist consultants, and whether content or process consultants, can work in different types of organizations as well. These organizations have more in common than they have in differences. They are all concerned with, for example, leadership, management and supervision, and with planning, organizing, and coordinating resources. Let's look at some of the typical differences that might affect the roles of consultants in each. In for-profits, there is, by definition, strong emphasis on generating profit. The priority is often, for example, on increasing sales and decreasing expenses. In nonprofits, there's strong emphasis on meeting a certain social need. Their operations might include strong focus on fundraising, using volunteers, and many times on public policy and advocacy. Government agencies also focus on meeting a public need, but rarely have high priority on increasing sales or fundraising or volunteers. Usually, they're part of a much larger organization comprised of many other agencies, so collaboration is very important. And that brings us to the fourth type of organization, a collaboration of organizations. For example, community organizations might collaborate to meet an overall public need, or for-profit companies might collaborate to make their value chain even more efficient. Which types of organizations do you serve? What types do you most want to serve? You can pause and resume the video again. Let's look at some common specialties in consulting to organizations. Consultants who specialize in certain management functions are often called management consultants, although those consultants might even be generalists with broad skills and expertise. This slide lists some of the most popular specialties. Take a few seconds and scan the list. Demand is increasing for specialists and boards, whether for-profit or nonprofit, in part because of the many recent public scandals involving very prominent corporations. Computers or information technology consulting is also very popular. Many might be specialists, but some might be generalists who facilitate strategic technology planning. Demand for leadership consultants is also growing as organizations struggle to set clear direction and follow that direction through the many new changes affecting us now. Management consultants also work in nonprofits with all of these specialties, but the specialties of fundraising and volunteers are unique to nonprofits. Regardless of their specialty, consultants should also have strong skills in the overall consulting process. We'll soon talk more about those skills or approaches in this video. What is your specialty? Is there more than one? Which ones? Write them down in your journal. Peter Block suggests that all types of consultants should work toward certain primary goals in any consulting project. As a consultant, your first goal is to establish a highly collaborative working relationship with your client. This approach helps ensure that your client always has complete understanding, commitment, and participation in the consulting project. Otherwise, your client is not likely to implement your recommendations or to learn from them as well. This is in contrast to the consultant who always works as an expert and directs the client to do certain tasks in a certain order by a certain time. While clients might appreciate that expert role and do the tasks as directed, they rarely know why they are doing them and won't know how to do them on their own in the future. Which leads to the second primary goal of a consultant, to solve problems so that their clients can solve them by themselves in the future. Your approach to problem solving should ensure that your clients always understand what is being done and why. That level of understanding is much more likely to produce the kinds of learning that your clients need to be self-sufficient in their own problem solving. Clients tend to understand and learn much more if they're comfortable enough with their consultants to openly share their questions and concerns. The last primary goal is to focus on solving your clients' problems and at the same time on the quality of your relationships with your clients. Clients often judge the success of a project not only by how well their problems were solved, but also by the quality of their relationships with their consultants. For example, do you really try to understand your client's culture and organization? Do you really listen to your clients, respect their opinions, and remain authentic in your relationships with them? The stronger your relationships, the more likely your clients will openly share their perspectives and opinions, the ones needed to get to the real truth of their situation, and the more likely that your projects will be successful. Do you agree with these primary goals? What other goals might you have in your consulting project? Maybe talk with others about the goals who are watching this video with you, then write down your conclusions in your journal. Similar to primary goals for any consulting project, Peter Block also suggests certain primary working assumptions for projects. Let's look at those now. First, problem solving requires that information be as accurate as possible. Information about a problem is much more accurate if it reflects the full range of perspectives and opinions about the problem. Your clients are much more likely to share that kind of information with you if they truly trust you. And that degree of trust is another outcome from a collaborative working relationship. The second assumption is that effective decision-making requires free and open choice among your clients. Your clients are much more likely to make free and open choices if they first had the opportunity to share and discuss their questions and concerns with you. And those opportunities are more likely to occur in a collaborative relationship between your clients and you. The last primary assumption is that effective implementation of plans requires the internal commitment of your clients. Their internal commitment is much more likely to occur when they truly understand and trust in your recommendations, which in turn comes from their active involvement in generating those recommendations. Do you agree with these working assumptions? Are there any others that you'd work from in any consulting project? Write them down now, too. Now let's look at some ways in which consultants help their clients to solve problems, especially complex problems. There are many different ways, but let's look at two very contrasting approaches. Some consultants use a rather organic approach. They get a strong sense of what the client's problem is and what to do to solve it for now. The way they work with clients seems to naturally unfold during the project. While this approach might seem to make some very quick changes in the client's organization, the organic approach has some disadvantages. The first is that the consultant's estimate of the time to complete the project might vary widely, thus costing far less or far more than the clients expected. It can also be very difficult to involve the client in a way that they fully understand and are learning from. If the project seems to struggle, it can be very difficult for the consultant to explain the causes of that struggle. Many consultants use a more systematic or planned approach, and the approach tends to include the following phases or some variation of them, perhaps with different names for each phase. A planned approach is more cyclical in nature than the following numbered list. The first phase is the contract phase, where the consultant and client explore the client's problem and how it might be addressed. They learn more about each other and decide whether to work together. This phase includes completion of a formal agreement to proceed with the project. In the discovery or diagnosis phase, the consultant and client clarify the problem using various approaches to get more information. They try to separate the symptoms of the problem from its real causes. They analyze the information they've gathered and come to conclusions about what actions should be taken. Then, they share their findings with other key personnel in the organization. The action planning phase is where the consultant and client, and ideally more employees in the organization, firm up their action plans for addressing the problem, with specific goals to be achieved, who will achieve them, and by when. The implementation phase is where the action plans are implemented. The priority in this phase is to sustain momentum and learning during the implementation. Continual evaluations ensure that the implementation is on the right track to solving the problem. The evaluation phase measures whether the problem has been solved. Other aspects of the project are also evaluated, for example, the quality of the collaborative relationship and the learning in the project. All projects should end with a termination phase, in which the consultant and client decide what to do with the results of the evaluation. They might cycle back to an earlier phase, continue the current project, or terminate the project. Your handouts include a concise overview of the differences between the organic and systematic approaches to consulting. It's important to recognize good reasons for clients to hire you and also the poor reasons to hire you so that you don't end up in poor consulting projects. Let's look at the good reasons first. A good reason is if the organization has very limited or no expertise in the area of need. For example, to develop a new product for customers or to install a new computer system. Or the need is short-term, for example, less than a year, so it may not be worth hiring a full-time permanent employee. Another good reason is if the organization's previous attempts to meet its needs were not successful. For example, the organization developed a strategic plan that was never really implemented. When members of an organization disagree about how to meet a certain need, they might bring in a consultant to provide expertise or facilitation skills to help members come to a decision. Another reason is when leaders want an objective perspective from someone outside the organization who is without strong biases about the organization's past and current issues. Sometimes a consultant can do the work that no one else wants to do, for example, data entry. However, some people would argue that this is not really a consulting project. Rather, it's merely hiring short-term clerical assistants. And last, there are times when an investor or other key stakeholder demands that a consultant be brought in to help further develop the organization. Can you think of any other good reasons to hire a consultant? Now, we'll look at some poor reasons to hire a consultant. You need to be careful that you don't get hired for one or more of these reasons. However, some people might believe that some of these are good reasons. It's ultimately up to you. One poor reason is that the organization wants to lend credibility to a decision that it has already made. For example, the board of directors has decided to reorganize the organization, but the chief executive officer disagrees. So the board members might hire a consultant to lend expert credibility to their own decision that they already made. Many consultants might consider this reason to even be unethical because it gives false hope to employees that a new decision might be made. Sometimes organizations hire a consultant to avoid responsibility for a decision. For example, when a supervisor does not want to directly address an employee's performance problem, so she hires a consultant to do the job that the employee should be doing. This is an irresponsible action on the part of the supervisor. Instead, she should just address the performance problem herself. One of the worst reasons for hiring a consultant is to avoid paying employee benefits, such as vacation pay or holiday pay. So the organization hires a consultant instead of creating an employee position. This is likely to even be illegal and could result in the organization paying fines and penalties to the appropriate government agency, such as the Internal Revenue Service in the United States. Yet another poor reason is when a manager hires a consultant because he is a friend. The organization would benefit much more from exploring the market of consultants and picking the best one because that consultant has the best skills, not because a consultant happens to be a friend of the manager. A manager might hire a consultant in order to spend remaining money in the manager's budget. That strategy is to show upper management that all of the budgeted money was spent and therefore the manager had done good budget planning. Experienced executives have learned to recognize this inappropriate strategy. Do you agree that these are all poor reasons? Can you think of any other poor reasons? So far, we've reviewed foundational concepts in consulting, including a very useful definition of consulting, different types of consultants, the primary goals and working assumptions of consultants, two very contrasting ways for consultants to solve problems, and good and poor reasons for hiring consultants. Next, we'll address one of the most important questions for any consultant to answer. Who is the current client in the project now? Your current client is the most important person for you to recognize now in the project. That person has the most influence on the success of the project and is the leverage point for change. you need to always be focused on working especially with that particular client now. But the role of the current client often changes during a project, so it's not always easy to know who the current client is. Let's look at some guidelines to help you do that. But first, before we do that, in your journal, write down your definition of what a client is in a consulting project. Then describe how you know who the client is. That is, how do you recognize the client? Then resume the video. When trying to identify who the current client is, answer these questions. Who seems to have the most influence over others in the project right now? Who seems to have the most access to the most useful resources now? Who directs the consultant's work now? Who determines what success is in the current activities in the project now? Remember, the current client can be one person or a group, and maybe a different person or group at different times during the project. For example, the first current client might be the person who hired you because that person had the most influence at that time. Then it might be the group working with you to really clarify the problem. Then it might be the group that is working with you to solve the problem. Just don't confuse the current client with other types of clients in the project. And let's look at those other types now. The official client has influence in your consulting project because of their official capacity in the organization. For example, they might have the legal authority to sign your consulting contract or your paycheck because that power is in their job description. In contrast, the current client has influence in the consulting project because they are the most aware of and perhaps the most knowledgeable about what you are currently doing in the project. They usually have the most influence in getting you the resources that you need to be successful in your consulting activities now. They usually have the most influence in getting other employees to cooperate with you now too. The official client usually remains in that role throughout the entire project, unless he or she switches to a different job role. In small organizations, the official client is often the chief executive officer. In larger organizations, the official client might be someone in the procurement or the legal department. Sometimes the official client is not directly involved in a project and might have delegated that involvement to another person or group. The other person or group might be your current client in the project. If the official client becomes involved in the project, then he or she is likely to rely on the current client for advice and decisions. That's another reason why it's so important for you to know who your current client is. Even if the official client is not the current client, you should be aware that the official client is always aware of the activities in the project in case the official client is somehow involved in any decision-making in the project. Indirect clients are sometimes confused with the current client as well. Indirect clients are people who are indirectly, but ultimately, affected by the consulting project. They might include everyone in the client's organization if the organization is small to medium in size, or the project if the project will affect the entire organization. They might also be people outside the organization who are directly affected by the changes in the organization. For example, customers, investors, and community leaders. Indirect clients can have a major influence on the culture of the client's organization and on the success of a project. That's because significant, long-lasting change won't occur in an organization unless the culture is changed. So ideally, indirect clients should agree with, or at least not disapprove of, the changes that will result from the project. You should always consider, how might the project affect them? How might you involve them in the project? This course includes a handout that helps you compare the different types of clients during your consulting. So, do you want to update your definition of a client in your journal now? Who is the current client in your consulting project now? And how did you identify that person or that group? Now that we've reviewed the foundational concepts in consulting, including a great definition of consulting, let's expand your view even more. Let's look at two seemingly different worlds of consultants, those of the external and internal consultants. Internal consultants are employees whose job is to guide and support fellow employees to solve problems in their organization, but they have no direct authority over those other employees. External consultants are not fellow employees in the client's organizations. The reason to understand the worlds of each is that they often partner to solve complex problems in their organization. Also, internal consultants often have great influence over the hiring and firing of external consultants. So let's define the internal consultant role more closely now. As we mentioned, an internal consultant is an employee of the organization. He or she is paid an ongoing wage or salary. The internal consultant has a job description and perhaps performance goals to accomplish over a certain time period. This consultant reports to a supervisor who also is an employee of the organization. Payroll taxes are withheld from this consultant's paychecks and probably gets employee benefits as well. Supervision, benefits, and the performance management of this employee are all guided by the organization's personnel policies, or they should be. The internal consultant is often a member of a staff department, for example, human resources, training and development, or organization development. In contrast, an external consultant is not an employee of the client's organization. The relationship of this consultant to the client's organization is based on a formal agreement, such as a project contract. The consultant is paid per the terms of that contract or agreement. Payroll taxes are not withheld from this consultant's paycheck. The person pays his or her own payroll taxes. Employee benefits are not provided. The performance of the external consultant is measured primarily by how well the project results were achieved. Those results are specified in the contract or agreement. Now let's start looking at how different their worlds can be, but also how similar. It's important for both types of consultants to know where each type tends to focus in organizations. The internal consultant focuses her attention on achieving the results of the project, maintaining a job, and developing good relationships with fellow employees. The external consultant focuses her attention on achieving the results of the project, retaining the client during the project, and maintaining what are usually short-term relationships with the client. It's also important to know how the client perceives each type of consultant during a project. The client's perception of the internal consultant is that she is a fellow employee. Her credibility comes from her job title and previous successes in the organization. Internal consultants are often perceived as generalists. That is, they have broad expertise in a range of activities within the organization. The client's perception of the external consultant is that he is an outsider. His credibility is based on his credentials and how well he completes the project. He might be seen as a specialist, depending on the nature of the project. It's extremely important that the client cooperates with the consultant in a collaborative working relationship. However, the client might cooperate differently with each type. A client's cooperation with an internal consultant depends on the client seeing top leadership supportive and cooperation with the internal consultant. It also depends on the consultant's authority, either from her official position in the company or from the nature of her personality. It also depends on the consultant's relationship as a fellow employee in the organization. The client's cooperation with the external consultant also depends on the client's seeing top leadership's acceptance and support of the external consultant. But the client really looks for the external consultant to show her skills and expertise early in the project. The consultant has to work hard and collaboratively in order to win the confidence and the buy-in of the client. And last, each type of consultant tends to have a different kind of influence during the project. The internal consultant gets her influence in a project from the official authority granted to her role in the organization. For example, if she's a vice president, her role usually has strong influence on others. The internal consultant's influence also comes from the quality of her job performance. If she's very good at what she does, she'll have strong influence. Some people have a natural strong influence just by the nature of their personality. The external consultant's influence comes from his expertise, and that should be quickly demonstrated in the project. His credentials and certifications in certain fields carry influence, as does his list of past clients, especially if that list includes organizations of notable stature or that are similar to the client's organization. The external consultant can also have strong influence through the nature of his personality. This course includes a handout that compares the two types of consultants. So we've gone through the major similarities and differences between external and internal consultants. So now, how might those differences affect how you're working with a certain current client now? Knowing that internal consultants often influence which external consultants are hired in their organizations, how might you market your services differently? Write down the answers to those important questions in your learning journal. If you ever have any questions or want to share feedback with us during the courses, simply send an email to info@consultantsdevelopmentinstitute.org. Again, thank you for your time during this video.